Captainmidnight.
This video is brought to you by Campfire. So last week saw the launch of Warner Brothers' huge streaming gamble, HBO Max, a confusingly named service that does include HBO, but also a ton more. So many Warner Brothers movies, Studio Ghibli films, animated and live-action comedies. I'll just say it right now, I think HBO Max has the best all-around library of any streaming service out there. There's niche services that may do specific things better, like Criterion Channel having more classic and foreign films, or Shudder having more horror. But when it comes to having a back catalog of tons of different kinds of things, from 90s sitcoms to TV dramas to heavy hitters like Lord of the Rings, it's really hard to top. But there is a reason my video isn't called HBO Max is the best streaming service, because I don't think it's there yet, and there are some glaring issues that have to be addressed pretty much right away. I'm going to go over both the negatives and the positives and talk about why I think HBO Max has the potential to become the single best streaming service out there. Alright, so let's start with some of the negatives. Like Disney Plus last year, HBO Max is starting out as an exclusive to the US, while planning to expand into other countries later on. That's a perfectly okay plan, but it hit a huge snag when potential viewers found out, many on launch day, that the service isn't yet available on Amazon Fire TV or Roku devices, adding up to like 80 million devices that just can't get it. I've seen people talk about whose fault it is, like AT&T didn't offer enough money or Amazon is gouging them, and I'll just say, I don't care. I don't care what multi-billion-dollar company wanted a few extra million here or there. At the end of the day, it just ends up being anti-consumer, especially since HBO Max didn't really make this super clear to people before the launch. Apparently they're trying to work it out, and I hope it gets solved soon because as it is, it's kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to this service. Another issue is the branding. I understand why they went with the HBO name. It's generally held in high regard by the public. HBO has had a mostly solid to great track record with original programming for over 20 years now. It makes sense that that's the brand they'd want to associate with. The problem is they've bogged down the HBO name in too many apps already. HBO Go and HBO Now was already confusing enough, but now there's a third service with a lot more content than those, and I think they had a tough time communicating what the difference was to people. Lastly, there's the interface. I've been using it on my PS4 and laptop, and it's not the worst. Like, I'd put it above Hulu, but it's not really great either. It at least has a really easy to find recently watched list, which is better than some services manage. But I don't think the homepage does enough justice to just how much content is on here. And these lines where it's just like a single show that doesn't even seem to change is a huge waste of space. Still, it's perfectly functional, and streaming wise, I haven't had a problem with it crashing after that first day. I got it the night of launch and I was really worried when it crashed on the very first thing I watched, but in the days since, it just really hasn't been an issue. Where HBO Max really shines is in the library. The app divides things up into hubs, and so far, my most used are definitely Studio Ghibli and TCM. Studio Ghibli has always been a pretty major blind spot for me, having only seen a couple of their movies. And it's been a blast to correct that, watching everything from 2016's beautiful and tragic The Wind Rises to 1984's very fun Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind. These haven't ever been on a streaming service legally in the US before, let alone presented with both English and Japanese audio tracks, so that's a pretty huge get for the service. TCM is also a big deal. I've complained in a lot of my videos about Netflix's lack of films from before like 1985, and that's definitely not an issue here. There is so much to dig into here if you're a film fan. Sure, there's a lot of well-known classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey and Casablanca, and I think it's really essential that those stream somewhere that's easily accessible to people. But there's some deeper cuts too. I rewatched one of Orson Welles' best films, Chimes at Midnight, which never gets enough attention, and the underrated horror classic Carnival of Souls. It's not all old movies though, there's a lot of big blockbusters on here, old and new. The Alien movies, Jaws, Godzilla, Harry Potter. Add to that that, a huge collection of TV shows that includes all of HBO, alongside stuff like Friends and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, some adult animated comedies like Rick and Morty, and a solid anime collection, and this library is the definition of something for everyone. HBO alone has so many good shows to pick from, big hits like The Sopranos and Game of Thrones, and great underscene stuff like Succession and Show Me a Hero. So when you add all this additional content on top of it, I do think it justifies the price. Since Max launched, it's become my go-to streaming service in a way that Disney Plus just never has. And even in kids content, I think it gives Disney a decent run for its money. Classics like Ponyo, old and new Looney Tunes, Sesame Street, Scooby-Doo, and tons of Cartoon Network, kids programming is definitely a base that it has pretty covered too. That's not to say the library is perfect. I found the DC and Adult Swim selection pretty thin. It's weird that Doom Patrol is the only DC Universe original that's made its way over so far. The Nolan Batman movies are expected to be here eventually, but much like Disney Plus at launch, there are some licensing deals that I guess need to expire first. And if you're a big Arrowverse fan, the only thing you'll find here is Batwoman. Yeah, they still got a lot of stuff. Wonder Woman, Joker, Tim Burton's Batman, but it seems like they were either hesitant or unable to bring over DC Universe as a whole. And that's something they really need to figure out. Either get rid of DC Universe, bring over all of that content, and give subscribers of it a free year of HBO Max, or make DC Universe even cheaper for people who just want that content without them feeling like they're being ripped off since it's available on a much bigger service. Either way, we need Batman the Animated Series on here as soon as humanly possible. Same with Adult Swim. I was really disappointed to see how bare bones the selection was for a channel with decades of history. It's even missing a lot of current ones, like one of my favorites, Joe Para Talks to You. I've always hated using that Adult Swim app, like it's probably my least favorite one that I use on a regular basis, so if they just wanted to shut it down and fold all of those shows into this, that would probably be my preference. But of course, we have to talk about the originals. One area where I think HBO Max could use a little help. If you're a fan of genre TV, like sci-fi, fantasy, horror, or comedies like Rick and Morty, you might not find a lot to love here. It launched with 6 originals, most of which aren't really for me. Which is fine. Reality competition shows like Craftopia and Legendaries just aren't my bag at all. I didn't hate them or anything, but they're not something that I'd go out of my way to watch. Same with the Not Too Late show with Elmo. I'm already not a big fan of this stale talk show format that guys like Fallon and Kimmel use, and when the only difference is it's hosted by like the 8th best Sesame Street character, it's not for me. I will say that some of the cutaway gags to other puppets in the control booth to break up the segments were pretty fun. On the Record is a really well produced documentary about assault in the music industry, and it's worth a watch. It's also just an odd fit here because it's next to all these TV shows, so I went in expecting it to be a series, but then it turned out to only be a feature film. The 2 shows I watched the most were Love Life, starring Anna Kendrick, and Looney Tunes Cartoons, a new attempt to revive the classic brand. Both of these are pretty solid. Love Life reminds me of movies like 500 Days of Summer. It's just charming and follows Kendrick's Darby through the last decade of her romantic relationships. There's not a lot of good rom-coms being made these days, and while I wouldn't put this up there with greats like You're the Worst, which had a much rougher edge to it, if you like Anna Kendrick, I think it's worth a watch. I enjoyed my time with it, even if it wasn't super memorable. Looney Tunes, though, if you have any affection for Bugs and the Gang at all, this is something you'll want to check out. While I think the animation, and especially the shading, is a bit flatter than the old cartoons, the writing and the characters are about as well done as you could ask for in a modern Looney Tunes. Honestly, I was kind of shocked by how clever the best of these were. They've tried to reignite the magic of those original shorts so many times, and this is by far the closest anyone has come. So even if I was only so-so to positives on the original, they at least have some stuff on the slate that I'm pretty excited about. Justice League Dark, featuring characters like Swamp Thing and Constantine, is on the way. A live-action Green Lantern, a J.J. Abrams produced crime drama about a getaway driver, a show about the Overlook Hotel from The Shining, and maybe the one that I'm looking forward to most, Circe, about the Greek goddess, and based on one of my favorite books of the last few years. I don't have time to go over everything in development, but I do think it could be a really solid slate. If a few of these shows turn out to be really great, and the average is at least better than Netflix, I think it would go a long way towards making HBO Max the best streaming service, period. Because remember, this is in addition to HBO's own slate of shows, and while not every HBO show is perfect, obviously, very few production houses are as consistently interesting. So that's HBO Max, a streaming giant with some glaring flaws, but also an incredible library that I really hope will keep improving. Netflix is still the top dog here, and probably will be for a long time, but honestly I found their library to be pretty lacking for a few years now, and with all these companies forming their own streaming brands, I wouldn't be surprised if soon it's just left with its originals. Disney Plus is, well, Disney Plus. I've covered my problems with that service a lot already. None of these are perfect, and I understand that all of these companies forming their own thing just lacks the convenience of those early days of Netflix. But if I had to pick just one service right now, honestly, this would probably be it. I just hope it improves, and I still feel that way a year from now. But if you want to take a break from other people's stories and tell your own, I really recommend Campfire Pro. Organizing stories that you're trying to tell is really hard, but it doesn't have to be. Campfire Pro helps you, the writer, keep track of things like character details and their backstories. And the Timelines feature helps you figure out your plot threads. You can even track character arcs and use the map view to create all the locations you need. Plus, the stories you write are private and no one else can access them. You'll also definitely want to check out the brand new World Building Pack. It's an expansion to Campfire Pro with even more tools to build your story's world. With this huge bundle, you can construct new species, items, magic systems, and develop your cultures with religions, philosophies, and languages. Campfire Pro has a 10-day free trial and 10-day return policy. And if you decide to buy, it's a one-time purchase of $49.99. So get rid of all the Word documents and spreadsheets and make your story planning clean and readable by going to the link in the description and pinned comment below.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.